Temp check. What kind of summer are we having this year? A family road trip summer? A beach bum summer? Or a wake me up when the sun sets summer? With Instacart, choose your own adventure and skip the shopping side quests. Where available, you can get ice cream delivered to your hotel, sunscreen to the pool, or cold brew to your bed. Well, door, in as fast as 30 minutes. Wherever you find yourself this summer, you can get the goods. Download Instacart for free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Excludes restaurants. Additional terms and fees apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
Each episode, our special guest will bring with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is critic and podcaster Jenn Adams. You've heard her on the Horror Virgin podcast, The Losers Club, and the recently released Psychoanalysis podcast. You've read her work at various places, including the Horror Virgin website and at Consequence of Sound. Welcome to the show, Jenn!
Thanks! I'm so excited to talk about this movie. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, we are so excited to talk about this movie. But first, before we talk about this movie, how did you get into horror?
I've kind of always been interested in and drawn to it, and it was just something that was so exciting to me. I think probably my entryway in was Stephen King, and I just am such a huge Stephen King fan. Anybody who's known me for more than 5 minutes probably knows that.
You have no opinions on Dr. Sleep, though, I know.
Oh, no, not at all. No, I don't love that movie with every breath of my being. Yeah, I just love it, and I could talk your ear off about Stephen King. But yeah, that was probably my entryway into horror. And then, and I wasn't allowed to watch a ton of stuff. So I watched a lot of movies at my friend's house, but Stephen King, my dad had a lot of Stephen King books. So I could, sneak those in my room. And I also remember recording things secretly in the middle of the night and then watching them in the middle of the night so that my parents didn't know I was watching them. So yeah.
That part is so funny to me because Brennan Klein was talking about recently doing a mini podcast series on the Freddy's Nightmares, I think it's called. Is that what it was called? The television show? Was it Freddy's Nightmares? I can't remember what it's called now. I'm like drawing a blank. But it's one of those shows that aired, and I remember trying to stay up late and out past my parents so that I could watch this show because it was on late at night, and I fell asleep, and they apparently found me sleepwalking downstairs to go watch it at one point. Goodness. So I completely understand that desire of sneaking out after dark or recording things after dark to try to, Freddy's Nightmares. That's what it's called.
Freddy's
Nightmare on Street series. Yeah.
I never heard of that before.
It was very short-lived.
Okay.
So it's weird how Stephen King seems to be a gateway for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. What was the first Stephen King book that you remember reading?
The Stand. It was my first and favorite.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God. Holy shit. Wow.
How old were you?
It was when the miniseries came out. And, I don't have a concrete memory, but I think I probably read some Night Shift short stories before that. And now that I'm actually talking about it, I was a huge fan of Fear Street, too.
Oh, hell yeah, same.
So that might have been a little bit before, but yeah, I watched the miniseries, and then my dad had that book on the shelf, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I've got to get more like Franny and Stu together, and I just like devoured it, and it's still my favorite book.
I have never read Fear Street, any of the Fear Street
You
books.
haven't?
They're so good.
Fuck, they're so good. Like,
Yes.
the Fear Street, I really liked Goosebumps, and then I went up to Fear Street, and then there was a couple other, like, young adult authors, like Christopher Pike, who wrote, like, horror books for teens, and, like, I consumed them at a ridiculous rate. Like, they're so good.
They really are.
I went from Goosebumps to Stephen King.
Okay. You just, like, went right to it.
See, and
no
I never
bridge.
read Goosebumps. Like, I think
yeah.
I don't know if I was just
okay.
too old, and it was just by the time Goosebumps came out, I was already reading Stephen King, or if I just missed it. But yeah.
Oh, man, I fucking love Goosebumps.
I did too.
God.
Yeah, my teacher actually, was it fourth or fifth grade? My teacher read the very first Goosebumps to us in class, and from there on, I was like hooked.
So
Is that
good.
the one about the dummy? The
You know, I don't
Oh,
remember
the
now.
one.
felon?
Yeah, I read one of those for a book club about a couple of months ago. I'm like,
Welcome to Dead House. That was the first book.
That's the first one, yeah.
Yeah.
Night of the Living Dummy. That's what I read, but that's not the
Yeah.
first one.
Fear Street was so good though. It was like,
It
and I
really
felt like such an
was.
adult for reading them too, because like they were like kind of gory, and like the teens said curse words, and I was like, ooh, I'm an adult. But anyway,
They were great.
So how did the Horror Virgin podcast begin?
So I had a friend that I knew back in like church youth group. And that was Clint, and he had a friend that he went to high school with, and that was Todd. And they had been talking about like starting a podcast forever. And I think they had one before that didn't do very well. And talking about, cause Todd hates horror movies. And so and Clint loves them. And he's like a huge like gore hound, you know? And so they've been talking about that. And then I bumped into Clint at like a youth group reunion, and we started talking about it. And he was like, hey, I think like, it was like the pieces all came together, you know, and so we just started. And then about 20 episodes in, Clint had to leave for some personal reasons, and everything's fine. But so we just kind of, and that's when Mikey came on. So that was kind of, everything kind of came together to birth the Horror Virgin.
Does he still hate horror movies?
He really does. Yeah. Like people will say like, oh, he must be like getting desensitized to them. But like because normally what we do when we're not quarantined is we watch the movies together, and then we record right after. And I would like record some of the times when he gets really scared. Jump scares really get him. Like Sinister is maybe the most terrified I've ever seen him.
oh no,
I love it. I
that's
love
amazing.
it.
Yeah, he's like kicked over the ottoman a couple of times, and
Oh my
like he'll
God.
button his shirt up over his face. Yeah, it's really funny.
That's hilarious. Those are the best people to watch horror movies with, though.
They really are. Yeah, it
Honestly.
is really fun. Yeah, it kind of takes you out of how scared you are a lot of times.
It does.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, why did you want to do a podcast about psychoanalysis?
Yes, I was so excited about this. So I have always been, I think part of the reason I was drawn to horror is because I'm just fascinated with why people do things, and kind of like their motivations. And I think if I went back to school for like no strings attached or anything, I would want to study anthropology, because I just think it's so fascinating.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and like why people are scared of certain things. And I think that really tells you a lot about who a person is. And so I've always kind of been drawn to that. And then in the last maybe 5 to 10 years, I've just been going to therapy. Started to realize I had a lot of issues that I hadn't dealt with and didn't really understand. And just seeing what therapy has done for me in my life. And I write a lot of blogs for the Horror Virgin, and I kind of just write about whatever I'm feeling. And a lot of it just happened to be about mental health. Like I wrote some about PTSD, and I wrote some about addiction with Dr. Sleep. And I actually have read quite a few of those blogs in therapy. And so I was just thinking like, this is something that has really helped me, and seeing the way that therapy and watching horror movies has helped me kind of understand some of my fears and overcome them, and kind of like experience empowerment even when I don't necessarily have it right now in my life. So I just was, and where we all are right now with this, like, who knows what tomorrow is going to bring. It just kind of seemed like the right time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So cool.
That is really cool. Sorry, I was taking a drink.
Oh, no. Fine. No, we've done 3 episodes now, and it's just been really great conversation and kind of helped me work through some things. And so I'm excited about it.
And then how did you get into writing? Because I know that you, like you said, you write for the Horror Virgin website, and you also are at Consequence of Sound. How did that come about?
Yeah, so even like saying like I write for Consequence of Sound still kind of kicks up my imposter syndrome a little bit. I'm like, yeah, but not really. So when we joined the Consequence of Sound network, when Horror Virgin did, I just kind of started to become friends with Michael Rothman, who's the editor-in-chief over there, and just talking about podcast stuff. And then we just happened to be talking about Dr. Sleep. And I said, well, hey, I just wrote this thing because Dr. Sleep and The Shining, like, they have, like, such a big place in my mental health journey. And so I wrote this thing about it. It took me forever to write it. And so he said, well, send it to me. And so I sent it to him, and we just talked about it. And then about a week later, he said, let me know when you want to start pitching op-eds. And I was like, okay, well, what's a pitch? And what's an op-ed? And so, but then it just kind of, one day he messaged me and he said, hey, do you want to write a thing about the Dr. Sleep, the differences between the movie and the director's cut? And I said, of course I said okay, because I've learned the hard way that if you say no sometimes, like, those opportunities don't come around again. Yeah. So I said yes, and then I figured out how to do it, and it turned out really well. Like, Mike Flanagan retweeted it, which was one of the cooler moments in my life.
That's so fucking cool.
I know. It's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So yeah, there's still part of me that kind of pinches myself whenever I like get an assignment or like I see one of my pieces get published, and I'm sure he's like annoyed by getting my crying emojis. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's real.
Own it. That's awesome.
I know. I really need to start doing that.
But it's also kind of nice to be like, oh my God, I get to do this for part of my life, and it's pretty cool. Like, it is really so cool. Weird but cool, and like, hey, that's my dream right there, writing.
Exactly, yeah. There's so many times I've been like, yeah, just like throw in Final Girls, and that's my life's work, and I just got to work on that last weekend. It was so cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Terry, do we want to talk about what we've been watching recently?
Definitely.
So, Terry, what have you been watching recently?
So, in my never-ending quest to catch up on movies that I own, I watched this ridiculous movie. I mean, I don't even know what to say about it. It's called Doom Asylum.
Okay, I like the name.
And it's from 1988. Okay. And it opens up with a scene of this lawyer and his wife, I think, and they're driving in a convertible, and they're drinking while they're driving. And they start making out while they're driving. And then they get into a car crash and are completely thrown from their car. He drags himself across the ground screaming, Judy, Judy. And when he gets to her, he grabs her arm and then realizes that it's detached from her body.
Oh, God.
And she dies. He dies, sort of. And the next scene is them operating. Like, he's on the autopsy table, and the morgue attendants are like, have cut him open and stuff. And it turns out he's still alive. And
oh my God.
He gets up and kills them, and then decides to haunt this building, which is now an asylum. I'm not quite sure the connection.
But he's a real person who is a live person who is haunting an asylum.
Yes. Okay. And he's like missing half of his flesh. Like, like he's mostly like muscly, like on his like half of his face. I'm sending you a picture in chat. But like,
oh my God,
it's
I just looked at the pictures.
It's so weird. Like it definitely is coming from that era after like Freddy, when Freddy like is wisecracking every 2 minutes, because every single kill he has something weird to say. Like this one punk girl, she like begs him not to kill her because she's actually Republican. She voted for Reagan. And so he kills her, and then he's like, he makes some kind of quip about, While I respect your First Amendment, I don't necessarily agree. This is
Oh my God.
I kind of love it though.
And like, there's this weird part. I tweeted a video of it the night I watched it, but there's this weird part where there's this girl who's played by the same actress that played Judy. I don't really know their connection. I don't know if like she's supposed to be her daughter, and they come back to this asylum because this, it's the 80s. All these kids go to the asylum and they, to party and whatnot.
But, that's where you chill.
Well, yeah, but she and her boyfriend, like, she starts calling him mom.
Oh God, too much.
Like,
too much.
He makes like this comment about like, how he's always going to be there for you. Not like, I guess like your mom would be, but not like your mom, but maybe kind of like your mom. And then she's like, can I call you mom? And he's like, yeah, if you want. And then she calls him mom the rest of the time. When he tries to kiss her, she's like, no, that's incestual. It's so weird. It's so weird.
I have no idea what's happening, and I would like to see it immediately.
Meanwhile, the killer spends like a good chunk of his time watching this old movie that I can't quite tell if it's a real movie or if it's something that's shot for the film. But there is like scenes devoted to this black and white movie that he is watching. It is such a weird ass movie. I'm so glad I saw it, but it's so fucking weird.
Was it an Arrow?
It was an Arrow release, and
it
got
now.
me because the cover. I love the new cover.
I was gonna say
did.
the cover is awesome, like with the reflection in the saw. That's such a cool cover. I would have that as a poster.
It really is. Their art they've been pumping out recently has been really legit, and it's made me buy stuff.
Slashing with a snicker, slaughter with a smirk, Doom Asylum. But see, that makes me want to watch it, and like like they're doing a good job selling it because I don't care. This movie looks hilarious.
It is a little ridiculous. It kind of gets a little long in the tooth, even at like an hour and 17 minutes.
Oh God, that's the worst. Oh, that's the fucking worst.
But it's definitely an entertaining romp, I would say.
Okay.
But to go from that, I also saw the new movie that's coming out, and I know you have too, Mary Beth, Amulet.
Yes.
Which is directed by a woman. Who is an actress, Romola Garai. Mm-hmm. And it is a bonkers movie as well.
For different reasons.
For much different reasons. It has, it's about this ex-soldier who is homeless in London, and he's offered a place to stay at this decaying house. And there's this young woman that lives there with her mother who is sickly and dying, and it's cut between like him now and him in the past with this other woman, and there's something demonic going on potentially, and it's so good, but it's so weird. What do you think, Mary Beth?
I definitely was like lukewarm on it when I first saw it, and the more I think about it, the more I really, really enjoy it. It's like super ambitious and weird. I wish it had been weird the whole time. I think there's like a very, very, very distinct shift at the end. Yeah. And I think there's sprinkles of that in the beginning. And I think it's going to lose some people with like kind of the slowness of the beginning. But again, like I feel like that's kind of the horror formula now, is like a little bit slow and then a good payoff. The payoff is absolutely batshit insane.
It's so gothic though. Like Mary Beth, you and I were kind of talking offline about the fact that like it really feels pulled from like those kind of gothic romances that you would read from like either like Wuthering Heights or like Jane Eyre, from like the crazy woman in the attic type thing, and like the way it subverts that is really interesting. Yeah.
And I'm not as familiar, or I guess I wasn't thinking about it as much when I was watching it, so I need to rewatch it with like that kind of thinking. But it's really, I mean, like it's truly unique, which and like goddamn, women directors in horror are like killing the game this month. Like, well, I guess Saint Maud's not coming out anymore, but when it was,
yeah. Between that and Relic and this, have you heard of Amulet, Jen?
I have not heard of it, but I need to seek it out now because it sounds fascinating. I feel like it's not often that you hear gothic and bonkers in the same sentence, you know? So I'm down
Right.
for that.
Yes.
It definitely feels like that kind of gothic romance that you would, I mean, I was an English major, so like I read so many of the like British lit from that period.
Yeah.
And so like to see it kind of on screen as this like more modernized kind of take on it, but still pulling in a lot of the like, he's a conflicted man who's like talking about like how he's a good man who's done bad things, and it was bringing to mind like the kind of romanticism of like Heathcliff back in the day and Mr. Rochester, and so like there's all of that aspect to it, as well as this kind of cuckoo bananas demonic aspect of it that's just I not to spoil anything, but there is a fucking bat that's in a toilet, like a bat rat. It's skinless, it's hairless,
believe me,
and
that's not a spoiler because boy oh boy,
it's
fucking weird.
It's so fucking weird.
A bat
But
rat.
it is. Yeah, it's really, the more that I sat on it and thought about it, the more I did enjoy it.
Yeah, I've got to see this movie.
Yeah, it's going to be polarizing, I think. Pretty polarizing.
Well, it's also coming out, I think, the 24th.
Yeah, so it'll be
coming out
soon.
soon.
Yeah, so we'll be excited to see what people think of that movie.
For my gay fans, Alec Secarnio.
I
I
can't
can't
help
pronounce
you.
his last name, but he was in God's Own Country.
Ugh, so
He
good.
is the main character in this, and he is still delightfully hot to stare at.
He's also a good actor,
He's a very good actor.
but he is also really hot. Both is good.
Yes, both is really good. As we'll probably talk about later on tonight.
I know I will.
Oh yes,
But that's the two that I saw this week. What about you, Mary Beth?
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about two, but just before I go to the two I've watched that I really want to talk about, I finally watched The Witch Subversion, and I loved it.
So good.
Freddie, thank you for suggesting it. The Witch Subversion is now on Netflix, everybody. So if you're looking for a wild Korean thriller horror action thing, please watch it. It is so worth it. It is absolutely bananagrams.
Has a great twist too.
Has a very good twist. So the first movie I'm going to talk about is found footage. Surprise, surprise. I watched this film called The Blackwater Vampire. Shocking, I know. I had been holding off on watching this one because I feel like a lot of found footage horror movies with creatures are kind of cheesy. I was pleasantly surprised by this film. It came out in 2014, and it's basically a documentary crew goes into the woods to document or to tell a story about the killings that happened in Blackwater and how the person who is being convicted and is facing death row for it is not actually guilty. And then they find out that the truth. Very basic found footage format. It's compared a lot to the Blair Witch Project. I don't see... I can understand the comparison because, like, they're in the woods as a documentary crew, but, like...
It's also very similar in name, right? BWV.
Yeah, the Blackwater. I didn't even think about that. And so, like, I read on Letterboxd some of the reviews, and they were like, this is just a ripoff. And I don't think so. In my opinion, it is not a ripoff of the Blair Witch Project. It takes a lot of cues from the Blair Witch Project, but it does a lot of really...
What found footage doesn't, though?
Exactly. Like, a lot of found footage that takes place in the woods with the documentary crew is going to have some Blair Witch ripoffs because the Blair Witch, like, set basically the tone for the entire genre of found footage. And so I really enjoyed it. The creature design is really awesome. And they have a lot of really harrowing shots and moments that I thought were really well done. There's a sequence where they're actually filmed with the serial killer who they think has killed all these women. And it's, like, really creepy the way they film with him and talk with him. So I think it's well worth. It's streaming on Amazon Prime, and it's good. I mean, have either of you seen it or even heard of it?
I have not heard of it.
I hadn't heard of it until you had, I think, tweeted about it.
Okay. That's fair. It's one of those smaller ones. But again, it's one of those, like, hidden gems that is on Amazon Prime that is definitely worth your time, and it's, like, less than an hour and a half. And if you like found footage, I think you would enjoy it.
I love found footage, so I'm down.
Yes! Hell yeah. The Blackwater vampire is super awesome.
Found footage and vampires, right?
And
Exactly.
I love vampires too, so yeah.
I'll just let you guys talk. I'll just sit back.
And I was like, I knew I had wanted to watch it because I was like, it's got vampires in it and it's found footage, but I was so nervous it was going to be bad. And I was like, I don't want to, I'm not ready. But I was not disappointed. So, hey, it's great.
That's awesome.
And then I finally watched Excision, which is from 2012. 2012, I think. Shout out to Tony Kaufman, who wrote an article about this movie for Gaily Helpful for Pride Month, and got me to finally watch Excision. It basically is about a girl who discovers that she's got a fetish for blood. Yeah, that's like, I don't want to spoil it, but it's like, it's got, so Anna Lynn McCord plays Pauline, the main character, and she was in, I think, the reboot of 90210 that I was obsessed with, which shows my age, shows my whole baby age. But she was in that show, and I was like, she's in a horror movie? And I wish she was in more fucking horror movies. She was amazing in this film. And she wants to be a surgeon, and so she has these really intense, like, sexual dreams about, like, performing surgery and having sex with people after surgery. It's very weird, but it's like done in such a really fascinating way in terms of visual style, because they contrast her dreams that are like these very like stark stylized design sets to like the suburban household where she is like very much like an acne covered teenager. And so it's real gory and real fucked up, but I really enjoyed like the transformation you watch of Pauline becoming more confident in herself as she embraces her sexuality rather than being scared of it.
It's so funny that you mentioned the different ways it's filmed, because I'll be honest, when I was trying to find pictures to include in his article, I was like, is this from the same movie?
Yes.
Like some of it is like very artful and almost like painterly, like kind of like Renaissance Gothic type. Mm-hmm. And then some of it is like pimply teenager. So it was really weird to like, am I pulling from the right movie? Yeah.
Well, because in her idealized version of herself, she's like super hot and in like super tight clothes, and her hair is perfect, because like if you're in your own fantasy, of course. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad I finally watched it. It is, I don't think it's available. I think it's on streaming on Prime actually, but it's a really cool look at that kind of like teenage girl coming of age, like losing her virginity story, but from like a very macabre angle that I really, really enjoyed. So
he makes very weird movies, Richard Bates Jr.
He does make very weird movies, and I liked this one because it had like a Blue Velvety vibe in terms of like how the suburbs were portrayed as like very strange and like uncanny despite it being the normal. And the tone of the whole movie is just like kind of funny and kind of awful, and I love that. So,
have you seen Tone Deaf?
I have not seen Tone Deaf.
Okay. Have you, Jen?
I haven't. Mm-mm.
I was just wondering, because like I did not like that movie.
Okay.
and I wasn't quite sure, because like I've heard people are real mixed on it, but like he seems like a very eccentric kind of director.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. Excision is weird. Yeah. But, like, the weird that I love. So,
awesome.
I'll have to watch his other movies and see if I like them as much. But, yeah, I would recommend this one.
It's the one that always gets, like, talked about with him as, like, probably his best movie.
I would agree, yeah.
I know, but, like, yeah, I haven't seen... The only one of his I've ever seen was Tone Deaf, and I was like, this is not working for me.
Jen, what have you been watching or enjoying recently?
So I've been watching a lot of stuff that like either for podcasts or for writing stuff. And I really just have kind of had a list that I've needed to check off. And which I'm sure you guys know, like sometimes you're like, I just want to sit down and watch something without taking notes on it.
I know.
And like one time I was watching, I can't even remember what it was. And I found my brain, like I had to shift it out of like consciously remembering everything that was happening and just kind of like letting the movie flow with me. And I didn't even remember what it was, I guess, because I wasn't taking notes on it. But so I just did a piece about female action stars for Consequence. And I have been watching Birds of Prey, which I am never going to shut up about how amazing that movie is, because
never shut up about that movie. That movie is perfection.
It is so good, yes. And I mean, more people should watch it. But I didn't rent it. I bought it because I just knew what would happen is what happened. I've just been kind of putting it on repeat in the background and just like looking up at some of the roller skate part that just makes me cry sometimes. So I've been watching that. But then I also went down a DC superheroes hole, which was maybe not my favorite, although there are some bright spots in there. But another one that I was writing about, and this is like not obscure at all, but I recently rewatched The Sixth Sense from like 1999. Yeah, that was when I was assigned we're doing this 100 greatest blockbusters. And that's one of the few like horror blockbusters, you know. But I remember when it came out, and I think it was 1999, and I remember everyone was obsessed with it. And it's like I was watching it, and I was thinking, this movie is so known for its spoiler ending, or like its crazy twist ending, that you forget how good it is, you know?
Yeah.
And I was watching it, and I was watching the scene with Toni Collette in the car, and just like crying my eyes out, and like just looking at all of these performances, and like this kid who just like has so many problems and is just trying to make everybody happy even though he's miserable all the time. And I was like, this is a really good movie. And I think we just forget about that because we're so focused on, like, I'm not going to spoil the spoiler that everyone in the world probably knows, but like if you've somehow managed to avoid it, I'm not going to be the one to spoil it for you. But I feel like that has so overshadowed that movie that we forget, like, it's a really good movie, and it's really scary in parts too.
It really is. I had rewatched it recently because someone was like, hey, want to watch The Sixth Sense? And I was like, yeah, sure, why the fuck not? And I was like, damn, even if you know the ending, it really is like, effective and beautiful and so sad, like you said. Like, it's so sad.
Like, I found myself forgetting that the big twist was going to come because I was just so invested in, like, this kid and his mom and their, like, family dynamic. It was, and that moment where, like, I think it's Misha Barton with her, like, terrible story. Like, that really hit me, too. It was like, oh, my goodness. Like, watching the dad watch that videotape. Oh, my God. That's just so terrible. Yeah, so that made me cry a lot, a lot more than I was ready for. And so the thing, I've been working from home, and I kind of just like to have things on in the background. So the thing that I've been watching right now is Supernatural.
Oh, really? Someone else that we talked to has been, like, revisiting Supernatural.
Well, I never watched it before. I think there's a lot that I love about Dawson's Creek, but I think that it ruined me for a lot of CW shows because I missed Buffy the Vampire Slayer because I think I was like, oh, that's on CW. I'm done with that. And I missed Supernatural. And now I'm going back and watching both of them. Like, these are really good. And this is so my shit. Like, why was I not? And I just think I was so, like, I just prejudged them because of the network they were on. But like,
I understand that, though.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it was maybe One Tree Hill where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. But it's interesting. And, like, I look at it through this lens of, like, this was like 10-ish years ago, because I'm on season 4 right now. Like, we've moved forward in a lot of ways in television. Like, there's much more diverse representation that is not really present yet. But I mean, it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And it's funny because, like, the first season, it was very Monster of the Week. And then, there's nothing wrong with that. But I was like, how's this thing going to go on for 15 seasons? And just, like, the creativity and where the seasons go has kind of been shocking me. It's like, oh, wow, well, somebody's already been to hell and come back, and just like how that whole story played out. It's like, huh. Yeah, so I'm into it.
I need to keep watching because I had this similar thing where, like, I watched it and I was like, oh, this is okay, but I don't really know, like, what else I could get out of it. And then multiple people have just talked about how it is so good. And I was like, ugh. And then I judged it based on its stands on Tumblr. I think I was scared of Supernatural stands for a while because they're, like, very intense. But maybe it's time.
Well, I will say it's helping it that it's a background show.
Yeah.
Because, you know, and I also watched Gilmore Girls as my background show before that, which was really good too. But I think, like, the parts that would annoy me if I were just sitting and watching it without doing anything else, I kind of just tune out and then I zone over to, like, the really cool stuff or, like, the really great episodes. I'll walk over and just sit and, like, while I'm eating lunch or something. So that's helping it a lot because I don't notice as many of the rough edges.
It seems like a good quarantine show.
It has been great. Yeah. Yeah. Like, no, it's really not, like, sometimes I tried to watch Hannibal and I really want to watch Hannibal, but
so
I was just, and that's what I've heard. I'm not great with body horror, so that was what originally turned me off when it was originally airing. But I started watching that first episode, and I was like, I love this, but I cannot emotionally handle this right now because it was just very dark. So I was like, I'm going to either like take this in like little bites, or I'm going to like come back to it at another time in my life because I know that I would love it, but I also just... It's not where my head is. My head can't really go there right now, you know?
That's valid. It's a pretty intense show. I love it. But again, like, it is, you cannot watch it unless you are in a very particular mental state to watch someone get eaten.
Yeah.
So, you know. So we've talked about what we've all been watching recently, but Jen, what film are we talking about today?
You guys, we are watching Fright Night. I am so excited. For real.
For real.
For real.
So, in case you've never seen Fright Night, Charlie Brewster becomes sexually confused when he discovers his new neighbor is a hot vampire, played by Chris Sarandon, who I love dearly.
Me too.
Torn between his girlfriend and a pair of unmarried gents, he enlists the aid of a closeted television host to vanquish his burgeoning desire. Terry, this is a very good...
I was just going to say, I love this reading of it.
I was going to say, well, Terry really, really went into the analysis of
This is
Frank.
one of my favorite movies. I love this movie, and I'm so excited that we're talking about it.
Good. So, Jen, how old were you when you first saw this film, and why did it scare you?
So I think I was 8 the first time I saw this. And like I said, like I watched this at my friend's house, and she had older siblings who were in like middle school and high school. And so I think, and it was just one of those houses where like a lot of people would spend the night, and it was kind of like the kid hang house.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And so the older kids were watching this, and I don't know if they knew I was in the room, but I was just kind of chilling, and watching it, and it scared the shit out of me. I took everything, like I thought it was literal, like I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying. And so then at the end of it, I have this memory of like the TV and then the stereo right next to it, and the credits were still scrolling. And this was the first time I'd ever heard the song "Living on a Prayer." And they must have turned the volume on the TV down and the radio up, but I thought it was like the end credits of the movie, like that credit song. And I was like, yeah, they are like, in my mind for the longest time, that song was written about this movie. Oh my God. Like they're halfway there. Like I remember when like Charlie and Peter Vincent are walking into the basement. It's like, yeah, they got to live on a prayer to get through this.
I love that so much.
And so that song has always seemed like a little darker to me than it probably does to most people. But that's my memory. And then like going home and being terrified because I mean, now, so I made my husband watch it with me pretty soon after we got married, and I was like, oh my God, this movie is so scary. Like, you're not going to be able to believe it. It's so scary. And we were watching it, and he looked over at me, and he's like, this is pretty silly. And I was like, yeah. And it's probably just because I had built it up so much as this really scary movie. And I was like, yeah, I think it is. Like, now I can see kind of the camp in it and like the horror comedy elements, which make me love it even more. Yeah. But like before, I was terrified. And that's where like all of my vampire lore comes from this movie.
Hell yeah.
These are the vampire rules, because Fright Night says
so.
That's amazing. Was there like a particular scene or like moment that you remember really scaring the shit out of you?
Yep, when he is in Charlie's bedroom.
Yes.
Yeah, and he ends up stabbing him through the hand with the pencil. It's so scary.
I also love that this movie just like at the very beginning is like, it's scary, bitch. Like I feel like it doesn't like hold back in showing you the monster, which I very much love about this movie.
I do too, especially when your monster looks like Chris Sarandon.
Oh God, can we just talk about him real quick? Can we just do it? Okay.
Yes.
God damn.
I know, man. Oh,
he can rock a sweater.
He can. Okay, and so like on Horror Virgin, we kind of have a joke where like I love guys that wear sweaters, and it's and it's kind of like somebody started a Twitter account called Jen's Sweater Bank, and they'll just like post like hot guys in sweater pictures for me, which is very considerate. But this was the birth of that, because in that scene, like the club scene, oh my God, where he's wearing that sweater, and
oh my God, scene. Yes, that scene when when I saw this as a kid, that scene was like, I didn't know what was going on, but I wanted to be Amy.
I think we all
Oh
did.
my god. But then like especially at the beginning where like you first see him and he's like sensually like playing with that woman's neck and I was like, hello, well-oiled chest. Hello.
Oh my God. And his
I
eyes
forgot.
in that scene. Oh my God. When he looks up, I'm like, whoo.
But then I was like, oh my god, he's making eyes at our boy.
So this kind of leads into when I first saw this as a kid. I don't remember how old I was, but like I remember it was one of my favorite movies as a kid. My dad introduced it to me. He loved like Dracula was his favorite vampire, so like he would always introduce me to the original Dracula or Nosferatu or even up to like Horror of Dracula, the Hammer film.
Oh yeah.
And so this was the first time that I really saw like I really took vampires as like quote unquote real, because in those it was always like some kind of gothic castle or it was like in some place away from me, whereas like this was like in the real world, quote unquote, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like next door, he's in suburbia, he's like he could be my neighbor. And what's so weird talking about the scene in the beginning where he bites the girl on the neck and through the window. I had never seen that scene growing up because my parents had a rule: no sex. So anytime there was going to be nudity on the screen or there was some kind of sexual thing, I had to close my eyes.
No titties for Terry.
No titties for Terry, which, I mean, come on. It doesn't really bother me.
I was going to say, really just... Oh my god.
But what's so weird is that, like, I equated, because, like, every single time I hear that song now, I equate that music with sex. Like, because it's that kind of like, because, like, I would have my eyes closed and I didn't know what was going on, but I knew that I couldn't see it. And if I could see it, it had to be inappropriateness or nakedness. And so there's two scenes in the movie. The first one is when he's biting the woman in the window. And then the second one is when he's, you know, taking away Amy's virginity, Amy's virginity. Like, I couldn't see it. All I heard was that music. And that music, whenever I hear it, it always makes me think of sex.
I mean, it's good
Wow.
sex music.
It is good sex music.
It is a good sex music. It's definitely very pornotastic for sure. But yeah, like I love this movie growing up, and I still do to this day.
Chris Sarandon is such a good vampire. Like the air of confidence around that man is just like, whew. And he just plays one so well. And like I forgot that he was Prince Humperdinck in The Princess Bride. And then he was the voice of Jack Skellington in Nightmare Before
That's
Christmas.
right. Yeah.
That's right, he was.
And so, like, Nightmare Before Christmas was, like, my favorite shit as a kid. Like, I loved it so much. And then just, like, realizing that he's in so many horror movies. And, like, oh, and he was in Child's Play.
Yeah.
But, my God, he hasn't been sexier than this movie, I think.
Oh, no.
In my
Few men
opinion.
have, honestly.
Few men has been as sexy as him.
I agree. How
Yeah.
old were you when you saw this, Mary Beth?
I have no idea. So I know I've seen this before, and I know this because I used to have this very silly ritual when I was a kid. Like, one of my chores was to fold laundry. And so I loved to fold the laundry because that meant I could go into my parents' room, sit on their bed, and watch TV while I folded laundry. And that's how I'd always find, like, horror movies to watch. So I'd go on demand to go to, like, FearNet or, like, one of, like, the random channels that we had and look through what there was on their on demand. And so I saw Fright Night, and it was vampires. And I think I was, like, in middle school, so I already loved vampires. And I put it on while I was folding laundry and, like, just enjoyed myself watching a vampire movie as I folded my whole entire family's pants and socks and stuff, which is, like, a very weird, like, specific memory. But it was one of my comfort movies that I would watch. And I remember really enjoying it. I remember nothing about it other than Chris Sarandon. But I don't remember it scaring me, though. I think I remember loving it because I love vampires that look really hot and are actually really ugly. Like, I'm very into that kind of vampire. So I think that was, like, kind of like a moment when I was like, all right, this is the kind of vampire I love. And also the cover art with the vampire mount, like the vampire over the house.
It's an awesome.
It's so
the cover art is so
good.
good.
I think that scared me more and got me into watching it. And I liked it when I watched it, but I wasn't as scared as I thought I was going to be by that poster.
Yeah, that poster, like it's one of the best from the 80s. I still love it so much. Just
so
like
good.
that face, like just etched itself into my brain. And I think the special effects in this movie are really good. I still think they hold up really well.
Well, yeah, especially when is it when Evil Eddie dies and he's like transforming from a wolf, and it's like the most heartbreaking thing, and it like goes on for a long time, and you're just very sad.
Yeah, that is really sad. I like the more I watch this now, like Ed just breaks my heart in this movie.
Right? And Terry, I know you have some feelings about Ed.
Oh boy, do I have feelings about Ed.
Jen,
I have
sorry.
feelings about this scene.
Jen, what were you going to say before? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Oh
off.
no, I just like that. That's what I think was really scary for me was like all of the body transformations because that's something I don't do well with gross and like body horror stuff, and that this may have been like the beginning of me being terrified of that kind of stuff. But what's funny, like Chris Sarandon is so like shines like the sun in this movie, like ironically, but I had a big crush on Charlie for like that's what I remember liking, and I was also weirdly obsessed with Mannequin 2, which he's also in. And Herman's Head was on, which I was into too. I think that got like one season, but like I really had a crush on him, and now I watch it and he's like my least favorite part of the movie.
Right? He's
kind of a dick, actually.
Yeah, kind of sucks.
Well, when your first scene is not listening when your girlfriend says stop, like
oh, I know.
I was like,
I wrote notes down of that. I was like, so he is a shit boyfriend is basically what I wrote.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, that like, I didn't pick up any of that stuff. Like,
no.
You know, how many years ago.
But it's like so interesting to see how like, I feel like that's a trope in a lot of those 80s movies though. It's like, come on, give me a break. And she's like,
I know.
No, I don't want to. And then she's like, oh, okay, I'm ready now. And then he's like, I'm distracted by the sexy man across the way.
I had never thought about it in those terms, but you're totally right.
Oh no, this movie is completely.
Terry's got amazing queer readings of this movie.
This movie, I like. Okay, let's break this down first of all.
Yeah.
There are 3 gay actors in this movie. Roddy McDowall is gay, and he was closeted his entire life. You have Stephen Jeffries, who plays Evil Ed. He's gay, and he did gay porn in the 90s.
No shit, really?
Yes, he was in gay porn in the 90s. And also the woman that plays Amy, she's gay.
Yeah, Amanda Burst, who I remember from Married with Children.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Which is probably has not aged very well at all, but yeah.
But okay, so we have 3 actors that are gay. So there's the idea of this, like he moves in next door. He has a live-in help who, let's be honest, they're totally gay for each other, Billy and Jerry. And so he moves in next door, and like when he's talking with when Charlie talks with Evil Ed, and Evil Ed is giving him advice, and he's like, so where do you expect the vampire to attack next? He's like, tonight, my bedroom. And then he literally comes out of Charlie's closet in the attack scene, like he's hiding in there for him. And Evil Ed makes all these little comments, like when they break up, he's like, so she finally found out what you really like. And then there's the scene where they're all at Dandridge's house, and he's telling him they can all come back anytime. He's like, that goes for you too, Ed. I expect we have a lot of the same interests. There's like so many little moments in there that speak up, that like talk to that. But the thing that really makes me sad, we talked about it a little bit, but I really want to dig in a little bit more, is Evil Ed's death. Because there's like 2 things going on in here. The first one is a kid who was it so bothered me because it was the first time that I think I had seen male nudity on screen.
Okay.
And it's combined with this very prolonged death sequence, right?
Yeah.
And like it was really sad to me because like I saw myself in that little weirdo. Like I didn't realize at the time that, you know, he was gay or whatever, but like I saw myself in him, and so the whole scene is very painful even when I didn't know why it was.
Wow.
But the other thing is there's this subtext to it, that you have Stephen Jeffries, again, who is gay, and you have Roddy McDowall, who is gay. Roddy never came out. It was only until posthumously that his friends would confirm that he was gay. And so like that whole extended sequence, going from when Evil Ed goes to his house and he tells him, I used to admire you. Of course, that's before I found out you were fake. It just feels really resonant to me because, like, again, you have Roddy McDowall, who was closeted, and you have Stephen Jeffries, who was at the time. I believe if he wasn't going to be openly gay at the time, but he was going to be, he was going to come out a little bit after that. So you had like this kind of pull of like this deeply closeted man that, you know, a gay person would look up to as being a leader and, you know, and someone to look up to, but he wouldn't come out of the closet. Mm-hmm. And then you have a scene where he's reaching out. He's reaching out to Vincent, and Vincent doesn't provide him any comfort. He looks at him with like this mix of like sadness and disgust and horror, but he doesn't reach out to help. And so like that scene, just like watching it now, just like really, really hits me in the stomach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, watching the look on Vincent's face really kind of broke my heart when I was watching this and just thinking about everything that meant for Evil. And I choose to believe that if Amy can come back, then that Ed can also. And we hear his voice at the end, and I like to think that like I don't know how, but he came back and is able to like live the life that he wants to live now. But I mean, maybe that is being a vampire. You know, maybe there's that interesting scene too when Jerry is saying like, when Jerry is transforming him or biting him and saying like, I can't remember exactly what he's saying, but he's like, they won't pick on you anymore. And like, it's better this way, you know? Yeah.
He says, you don't have to be afraid of me. I know what it's like being different. They won't pick on you anymore or beat you up. I'll see to that. All I have to do is take my hand. And he calls him here Edward. He doesn't call him Ed. He doesn't call him Evil Ed. He says, here, Edward, take my hand. And then it's like, he pulls him under his, you know, really cool trench coat, mimicking like a cape. But it's like, it's just, there's so much of that, like, and some of it is unintended. I mean, you know, it's like his death scene is completely unintentional, that it would be resonant, but just the idea that it's filmed like in the 80s when the AIDS crisis is going on, and you had like gay people watching other gay people dying, unable to do anything to help them. It's like, man, it's heavy stuff now watching it back like with adult eyes. Whereas before I was like, her mouth is like a shark. I love this. I loved Amy's transformation.
I do too. And I love her in this movie.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. That scene with her and Jerry is so sexual. And
my gosh.
And that may have been when I kind of was like, oh, this is new. Because there's a moment where she kind of jolts up a little bit. And then we very clearly see that he did not bite her. So we know that he did something. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this is such a sexual movie in so many ways, you know?
Well, and the whole thing is like definitely like about losing your virginity for the first time too. Like,
well, he even like quiets her because she's like, she's going to say, I'm a virgin. And he's like, no, it's okay. I got this.
And like, he bites her, and like, you know, when you have sex for the first time, the women are thought to bleed, and like she's bleeding and she's shuddering and gasping. And I was like, oh my God, how old is she? This is very uncomfortable, but also really erotic. And I feel very uncomfortable and have a lot of feelings. But wow, like, what a moment. What a scene.
Meanwhile, all I knew was that music.
So weird.
You're just imagining away.
Well, that's so funny. That's actually so funny because I had a similar experience with Coppola's Dracula. Like the scene where he has like where Jonathan has the orgy with like the wives. I wasn't allowed to watch it. And so I didn't know there was an orgy in that movie until much later in life. And I was like, wait, is this a deleted scene? And they're like, no.
It's so weird, like what the things that parents will do for like blocking out the sex side of things, like, and it ingrained in me so much that like even when I was watching movies with friends, I would cover my eyes if there was like inappropriate nudity on, because I was like, I don't want this to be taken away from me.
So weird.
It's
interesting. That is so weird. So have you guys seen the remake? The 2011, I think, remake with Colin Farrell?
Yes. I watched it this morning, actually.
I watched it today as well.
I saw you tweeting. I was like, I know what you're watching.
Anton Yelkin, R.I.P.
Oh my gosh, I know.
It's so upsetting. He's the best.
I know. And Colin Farrell is really good in this movie. Although if you compare him to Chris Sarandon, like, there is a warmth that Jerry in the original has to him. Like, he is not 100% terrifying all the way through. That I think is really like endearing. And I think the original movie just kind of has a warmth to it that the remake doesn't have. Although I do think the remake is scarier.
Yeah.
But I was so excited when I found out there was going to be a remake, and I really like the remake. I don't think it's as good as the original, but like I used to, when I was teaching, I had to do these portfolios every spring break that would take like days at a time, and I would just have to sit down and like knock it all out. And this and Cabin in the Woods, I would just put on repeat and just like have them on while I was doing all this work. So yeah, I really like the remake. I think they did. Like, we were just talking about the Charlie or the Ed scenes. Like, I think they made some really smart choices with the remake. As far as, like, who David Tennant, like, what Peter Vincent's character is. And, like, they're not, like, now I could totally be missing this, but I don't really read any queer subtext in the update. I read it more like as a tale about bullying and kind of growing up, you know, which I like that, the way they leaned into that. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I just don't think it's as good, but it's hard to beat perfection. So, you know.
You know, I agree, but it is one of those remakes that I think actually does a decent job of reinterpreting the movie.
Yeah.
Because like rewatching it today, I was like, oh, it is completely. It has some of the similar beats and some of the similar characters, but like it does things completely different from the original, which I think is to its strength. I don't like it when remakes are just like, you know, like the Psycho remake,
yeah, that's what I was
thinking. Or like even like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, which is problematic for many different reasons. But, you know, it's like if you're going to do something and take on something iconic, you got to try to put a different spin on it. And I think the new one kind of does that.
I think so too. And I think it mostly works.
Yeah. What stuck out to me, and I tweeted about this today too, is the use. I forgot that this movie was filmed with 3D in mind. So like, there's like some scenes where like the bucket comes flying through the glass of the screen, or like there's like the amulet that they focus on that's suspended in the water, and there like there's little spurts of blood that come right at the screen. And I'm like, man, this is definitely filmed at that sweet spot of 3D.
When that was a trend that we all were paying.
When that was a huge trend.
Ridiculous amounts of money for that.
Yeah, I know, man. I think I actually saw it in the theaters in 3D. And
Same.
Oh my God, amazing.
I know, but I don't remember it being in 3D because like it was like, it's like the Friday the 13th 3D one where they're just like, oh, we can make this shot 3D, let's do it. You know, like it doesn't, it's not like what's the blue people movie? Avatar. Yeah. It's not like that where it's like integral to the story and it like is really cool. It's like, let's do 3D. Here you go.
Let's throw things at the screen because we can.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Or like Friday the 13th, we're going to have this really long shot of a yo-yo coming directly at you.
Exactly. Right. I mean, and it's pivotal to the plot, so I'm glad they kept it in, but, you know.
Now, I'm sure you have because of your Avatar, Jen, but have you seen the sequel to...
I have. It has been a long time since I've seen it, but I do remember really liking it. But I also remember it was, and I mean, I love vampires and I love female vampires and I love strong women in movies. So that all came together into this one like happy vampire movie for me. It's been a really long time since I saw it. And when I picked my avatar, it was more to be a female vampire rather than to be Fright Night 2. But gotcha. I do remember watching this movie and it was kind of one of my first realizations of a sequel kind of trying to be the original in a different way, you know, rather than like telling more of the story, you know?
Yeah. Have you seen it, Mary Beth?
I have not.
I really like it. I hated it as a kid.
Okay.
Because it didn't have like, you know, the same, because it didn't have Amy in it, I don't believe.
I don't think so. He's got a newer, hotter girlfriend. And I said that in air quotes because Amanda Beers is great.
But like I watched it, and again, I obviously don't remember all of it, but like I watched it again a few years ago because it's not available here in the States, but there is a region-free German release of it. And I bought that from like Amazon UK or something like that. And it's it's held up really well. I think in some ways it's a lot more overtly queer than the original Fright Night.
Okay.
And like it's good from what I remember. I don't remember a lot about it, even still watching it again, but it was one of those that I did not like as a kid because it changed too much of the original and it didn't feel as the same because like it was a little bit more urban setting, vice the cityscape, vice like the suburbia, and it was like it just didn't do it for me as a kid. But as an adult, I do think it's kind of held up.
Maybe I
Hell
should
yeah.
check it out again. I feel like it's one of those that's kind of in the zeitgeist to be reappraised, you know? Like I've noticed people talking about it more and more recently.
All it's waiting for is like some U.S. release for people to start writing op-eds about how it's actually really good.
Yeah, that does make it hard when you can't actually watch it, you know?
But like I said, you can order the German Blu-ray.
Nice.
It works. I own it.
Hey, and maybe if we talk it up, we'll get them to bring it back.
Hell yeah.
Them.
That'd be
like
great.
this is them of the universe. You know?
Them.
Now, what I have to go back to Billy. What is Billy?
What?
He's a handyman, right?
Yeah. I was like, what are you talking about?
Well, and the remake doesn't have Billy. That's one of
No.
the bigger like omissions, you know.
But he's not a vampire, but he's obviously some
Yeah.
kind of like creature of some sort, because I don't think humans, at least that in my knowledge, turn into pea soup when they get stabbed.
Right.
You don't?
Yeah. I mean, we can try it. I turn into cake.
We're not cake.
No. I'm sorry, I'll
Oh my
stop.
god.
God damn it. It came up.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'll
No, it's
see
me.
myself out.
Am I human or am I cake or am I pea soup?
I'd rather be pea soup, I think. Yeah, because he's like he's not like Renfield and that he's like constantly saying master to Jerry. Like they seem to be on pretty equal footing with each other, you know. But he can come out in the sunlight and he doesn't die like. But then on the other hand, like how does Evil Ed? How is he a werewolf? You know, and
That
not
was
a
my
vampire.
question. I was like, but why is he a wolf?
I guess maybe they just had the effects and they were like.
I mean, I guess like there are some stories where vampires can turn into wolves. I guess there really isn't like a hard and fast bat rule. But
I always remember like vampires could turn into mist, bats, or wolves.
Yeah, mist. I just want to turn into mist. Yeah, Billy was the handyman, the lover, but
Yes. Oh my god, the scene after Charlie in the bedroom with him when he gets stabbed in his hand, and Jerry's calling him on the phone, and it's like a send up of the same scene from the very beginning where he's like biting the girl in front of the window. He's standing in front of the window, and fucking Billy is on his knees in front of him cleaning his hand. I'm like, okay, this is so erotic right here.
and like really like gentle and tender too, you know.
yeah, it definitely felt like he was a Renfield-esque character, but not as subservient. Like they were on par. But again, like what kind of creature? I don't know if he was a vampire. He wasn't a vampire because he's out during the day, right? Like,
Right.
was he a werewolf?
Maybe he's
I don't
like
know, and,
some
like-
kind of zombie or something. Like undead server. I don't know.
I think he's obviously maybe as old as Jerry is, because like he turns into sand at the very end. So like that kind of like
Yeah.
kind of told me that maybe he's like been around for a while. But it's always something ever since I was a kid. I was always like, what is he?
Yeah.
What are you?
His death too is so like endearingly hilarious, and I hate saying that about a character I really like's death, but like aside from the gore, like when he creeps up the steps and you see Peter Vincent and Charlie, like this is when I was like, okay, they know they're being campy right here. Like they're like, what was that? And they don't turn around and look, and then they're like huddled together watching this extended scene of him like green gooping all over the place, and they don't run away, and it's just like the reaction shots that keep cutting back to them. Like, I love this movie. This is so much fun.
I also want to give a shout out to Peter Vincent, because I forgot how funny Roddy McDowall is in this. Like even when he's first introduced in the movie that Charlie's watching, I totally didn't realize until this watch that he's holding the steak backwards. When he's going after the female vampire in like the movie, he holds up like the hammer and the stake, but the stake is facing him.
I don't think I noticed that.
Oh, I
It's
didn't
so like
notice
it's such a
that.
small little moment, but it's like, oh, he is so campy. And like the scene where they're going to him to ask for help, and they're like, oh, you want my autograph? You're like, no, this is much more important. What could be more important than my autograph?
I do love that line.
I love him so much.
I do too. I was obsessed with him for a long time after this, but it never like the things he was in never seemed to pop up on my radar. And I was like,
No.
oh, where's Roddy McDowall? Yeah. And I think David Tennant in the remake, actually, I like his character a lot. He's maybe, aside from Anton Yelchin, he may be one of my favorite parts of that movie.
Well, David Tennant is just delicious and amazing.
Yes. And I think he understands what that role is, too.
Yeah.
Yes. The scene where, like, you know, he comes off of being on stage and he's, like, talking with Charlie, Anton Yelchin, and he's just, like, stripping away all of the, like, you know, accoutrements that are his character.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he takes off his hair, and then he's taking off his eyelashes, and he's taking off his like, just the way he's, like, stripping back, and you see what he really is. It's such a funny little moment that I think that was a great reinvention of Peter Vincent's character.
I think so, too.
I also love Charlie's mom.
Yes. Yeah, she's giving them, like, sex advice. And they're like, Mom, we're in high school. It's like, oh, my God.
Or, like, when she makes him hot cocoa. He's like, Mom, I don't need hot cocoa. I didn't have a nightmare. It's so silly. It's so silly.
She's sweet. Well, and speaking of Charlie's mom, like, Toni Collette in the remake is
God.
great. I mean, she's always amazing, but, like, I love that she's a bigger part of the story in that movie, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I remember watching the 2011 one and revisiting the original Fright Night, being like, wait, I thought the mom had a bigger role in it because of Toni Collette's role in the 2011 Fright Night. But yeah, and I love Toni Collette, Queen forever.
Too. Yeah, Charlie's mom's really not a factor after getting, like, stuck in her bedroom.
Yeah.
Like, the night that he breaks in.
No.
She was working that night. That was
That's
so
true.
funny.
Yeah, and I mean, they set that up, so it makes sense. But
so, Terry, do we want to give us some ratings out of 5?
That sounds great.
So, Terry, how many You're So Cool Brewsters out of 5 do you give Fright Night?
You're so cool, Brewster.
I
love this movie. This is a full 5 out of 5 for me. I love this movie. I've loved this movie ever since I was a kid. It's one that I love to go revisit. Every single time I watch it, I'm picking up new things. I think that the fact that it started out for me as being like this amazing little special effects extravaganza that kind of brought vampires into the quote unquote real world for me has turned into an appreciation of, like, a lot of the subtext for it. I think this movie is fantastic. It's one of my favorite movies of the 80s, and it's one of my favorite movies, I think, period. I love it. It's my kind of comfort food. It is my hot cocoa whenever I have a nightmare.
Oh, I love that.
What about you, Mary Beth?
I think I will give it 5 You're So Cool Brewsters out of 5.
Hell yeah.
I haven't seen this in so long, and revisiting it today was like a warm blanket. It was so nice to watch, and it reminded me why I love vampires so much, and how versatile vampires are, and how cool they are, and how hot they are, and how gross they are, and that's why I love them so much. And I think it's just like... And I feel like it set a blueprint for a lot of teen horror movies that we've seen, like The Wretched that came out recently and a lot of other teen horror movies. And it's just delicious, if I may say so myself.
As delicious as Chris Sarandon in the sweater.
Yeah, exactly. Jen, how many You're So Cool Brewsters out of 5 do you give Fright Night?
I gotta give it 5 You're So Cool Brewsters. It's just so, like you were saying, like, and it hits my nostalgia sweet spot because I just have had such a, like, this movie has always been a part of my life. And this was the first horror movie I think I ever saw. So it kind of, like, awakened this thing that has been such a big part of my life and now has become such an important part of my life. And, like, it's just so, I feel like it's rare movies that can really marry fun and, like, scary and, like, this, and, like, gross, and then, like, a deeper meaning that I can really dig into, which is what I really love about horror. And it just, Chris Sarandon just is amazing in this role. And not just because he's hot, although he is, like, beautiful, but, like, he's a person as a vampire, you know? And I feel like we don't see that as much. A lot of times it's either, like, angsty teen vampires who aren't scary at all, or, like, just murderous vampires with no humanity to them. Yeah. And I think he's just so charismatic in this role. And it's, now that I'm older, he
feels like a real character.
He really does, yeah. And as much as I love Colin Farrell, like, I feel like that's missing in the remake, and it just really shows how much, like, he brought to this role of Jerry, and I just love it. I could ramble on forever about it, but yeah, it's into my top 5 of horror movies of all time.
Well, and it's like, it's those little things, like even the fact that throughout the entire movie, he's eating apples, right? It's like, there's all these little tiny character beats that makes it more than just that kind of stock vampire character.
And the way he eats the apple by like eating out the core of it.
Eating out the core.
Right? Oh, yes. Love it.
Well, thank you so much, Jen, for coming to talk with us about, Fright Night. I love this movie. I just had a... Where can our listeners find you, and what do you have coming up you'd like to share?
Well, you can find me on all the socials at Jenn Ferratu with 2 N's. You can find me on Mondays on the Horror Virgin, and we... I think the most recent episode, or dropping the same day, we just did Attack the Block, so that was really fun.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Attack the Block.
Love that movie. Spoilers for my thoughts on it. But you can also occasionally find me on the Losers Club. And you can now find me on Psychoanalysis. So we just, I think coming this week is going to be our episode on Let's Scare Jessica to Death. Talking about anxiety. And then up next, we're going to do a whole month on toxic and abusive relationships. And we're going to look at Midsummer.
I was going to say, are you looking at Midsummer?
yeah, Midsummer and The Invisible Man. So that's going to be some like meaty content. So yeah.
That's awesome. So listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with Fright Night? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, keep the conversation going by following the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Steve Barnold for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our amazing music. And thank you to everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Won't somebody please think of the children? Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children!
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.